Hey guys! Welcome to the channel. Since it was my break, I wanted to keep my making skills fresh. But since it's a pandemic and I'm doing a no-buy right now, I had to work with stuff I had left over from my other projects. So let's get into it! As my first project back from months of not really doing anything, I wanted to start small. So I thought making some earrings would be pretty cool and would possibly be something I could actually use once the pandemic's over. I listed down everything I wanted to make and settled on first making the Hanafuda earrings Tanjiro wears in Demon Slayer. Little issue is that I only had 3 pairs of earring hooks left in my storage and more than 3 ideas for earring designs. So here comes my idea. I wanted something that would allow me to make as many earrings as I want without having to buy any additional supplies, at least for making dangling earrings. Here's where my mom's old hobby of making bracelets comes to the rescue. With the lobster claw closures they use for bracelets, I open up the bottom of the earring hooks with my needle nose pliers, then I just attach the loop of the lobster claws on the bottom of the earrings. I know I can open it up anytime and change the designs attached to it, freeing me up to only need 1 pair of earring hooks for any design I'd want. It also gives me the freedom to mix and match designs if I see fit. Now on to making the actual earrings. I take a small piece of felt from some cosplays I've made before and trace one of my rectangular earrings. I already like the size of this earring, so I just use it as a template. I draw 2 tiny nubs on the top to act as the place where I attach the earrings without having to resort to ruining the design. Because it's just felt and basically cloth, I can use scissors to cut it out. I left the top with the nubs in a triangle instead of fully cutting them out, for a little handle which could help in the future. Now here comes the fun part. I make a mixture consisting of glue and baby powder in this tiny plastic teacup until it makes the glue a bit thicker but still runny. I'll keep a coat count on the screen so you know how many times I had to repeat this step. I flip the felt over against the curve it has, then put the mixture on with a brush, which I think is the best way to add this. When the mixture dries, it tends to leave the edges curving up, so by flipping it around, it would counter how the felt was rolled up in storage. The mixture seeps through the felt at this stage, so I put some random tissue under them. And you actually want it to seep through. This is so that the earrings have a base to grab onto. The glue gets into the fibers and locks them in place, keeping the shape that you can easily cut out. While the baby powder acts like a filler and a thickener, so the glue doesn't drip and can maintain its shape. For the first few coats, I let them dry with the weight on top of them so that they dry flat. My usual method is that I do 1 coat a day. It does take a while, but it was a method I made when I had more to do. Thinner coats don't take an entire day, but the thicker coats I'll put later on, I recommend leaving for a full day. Now, some of you may be wondering, how did I get this technique? So, I'm an avid watcher of Maker YouTube, and on Tested, which is Adam Savage's channel, if you don't know him, he's the guy from Mythbusters, they brought up a tip for model making or toy manufacturing. When there's small bubbles that form in plastic, you can take a mixture of super glue and baby powder to cover those holes up and have it dry in 30 minutes or less, and it would be as good as plastic. So I wondered if I could do that with regular white glue and baby powder, since I couldn't afford super glue and I didn't need it to set fast anyway. Some trial and error later, and here we are. By the way, that container of baby powder I was using was an old powder thing I filled up as a child but I didn't get to use. It felt off using decade-old baby powder on my face, so I'm using it for stuff like these. After doing 3 thin coats on both sides, I switched from using a tissue to using a plastic container as a drying surface, because the tissue was sticking to the base. This was also the time I used one of my push pins to poke a hole through the nub. I took one of the small metal rods I was planning to use and stuck them into the holes, just to make sure they were the right size. Coat 4 is when I started thickening the mixture because of the other coats have soaked into the felt already. And now we're going for height. So now the consistency of the mix is more like thick pancake batter. When that thicker layer is dried, I do some trimming and sanding. Felt has fibers that get coated in the mixture and stick out from the sides, which isn't necessarily a nice look. So I make sure to trim and sand the edges of both bases before I do the back coat. By the way, if you have any ideas for what earring designs I could make or other random fun things you'd like to see me make, leave them in the comments. Next coat, I try to fix the warping by gently persuading it in the right direction. Then I sand down the surface with an emery board, which is basically those things you use on your nails. The fibers also cause a lot of texture on the surface, so I would need enough coats to cover that up. This was also the time I pushed enough mixture for it to slightly dome over the top, and this was the most I've put on this base. After letting that coat dry, I do a thorough sanding using the emery board again. The powder actually allows it to be sanded smooth versus just using glue. You might not see it, but there's a lot of dust that's made while doing this, so make sure you wear a dust mask if you're planning to do this too. I use a tissue and my desk vacuum to help clean up the dust afterwards. When I'm satisfied with the general shape, I take my masking tape and mask out the parts I was gonna paint black on the top and bottom to make the lines where I want them to be. I take this tiny plastic pink coin thingy to serve as a template for the circle, which I wasn't really sure I could draw by hand. I just traced that on both sides of the earring for both earrings. Cool thing about the mixture is that you can actually draw and erase pencil marks on it when it's dried. I had a bit of trouble freehanding the arc shape on the bottom of the earring, so I had to go back to my old favorite, tracing some paper. So I just fold a little piece of paper in half, then make the shape I want out of the paper, then trace that onto the bases. With some reference pictures on my laptop, I start sketching out the lines on the earrings. And now it's finally time to make these into Hanafuda earrings instead of white rectangles. I start with painting the red circle in the middle, first going around the edges, then moving towards the center. Using acrylic paints made this easy because by the time I would finish painting the other earring, the other one was dry. Then I could flip it over and paint the other side. I mixed all my colors for the design, which included a nice light blue, and I painted the hill on one of the sides. I wanted to keep the pencil lines I drew as much as possible, so I started painting white on the spaces between the pencil lines, which was also super tedious. Usually, I'd use a wooden toothpick to make really thin lines, but we didn't really have any, so I tried using a plastic flosser thing. It was okay, but I didn't like how thick the lines were, and I noticed that I could get thinner lines with just the brush I was using, so I just used that instead. Going for a not smooth brain move, I colored all the white parts first on the rest of the earrings. I added the masking tape black for these ones so I can make the clean lines and divisions between colors. I didn't really like the one I made with the plastic toothpick, so I just covered it more with some white paint. It took a lot more coats to cover the white background than the red circle in the middle. For the lines, I took the thinnest brush I can, then made the lines as lightly as I could. I did the same lines as I could find on the reference photo. 3 lines on the bottom, diagonal down, then at the sides, diagonal up, then 2 small lines on the top. I'm not exactly sure if it's screen accurate, but that's the best I could do. Because the lines I needed are so thin, and the paint I got was pretty pigmented, using 1 coat of paint for each line was actually okay. So I didn't have to go through the very scary job of going over my lines again. Next is just the blue curves. Those were easy enough after outlining near the edge of the white paint. The tape on the bottom really helped keep the lines clean too. Like the white paint, it took a lot more coats to make it opaque. After a quick break, I did some extra coats on the blue parts. Then added a stripe over the boundary of the blue and white. To make it more accurate to the original, I added these triangles to the base of the bottom 3 lines. For the last touch, I repainted the middle red circles just to cover up some accidental covers by the white paint and to cover up any transparent areas that might be left. After peeling off the masking tape, I just had to paint the top and bottom with black paint. But before I could do that, I trimmed the top part to match the nub shape I was actually going for. After that, I just had to paint the parts with black paint, making sure that I'm careful around the borders. I even painted the nub part on top even if it wasn't fully hardened with the mixture, so it wouldn't look too far off from the rest of the piece. Just to make sure that the holes didn't get filled with paint, I got the metal rods I used earlier and just put them inside the holes. When the paint dried, it's time to make them into legit earrings. I didn't have jump rings either, which were those jewelry metal rings, so I'm making them myself with this wire. I grab my needle nose pliers again and start curving the end of the metal rod. I move the earring to the middle of that curve, then fully close it by bringing the end all the way around to the main wire. I do the same thing for the other side. Just did a quick check to see if the lobster claw would fit around my DIY jump rings. One side was fine, but the other was too small, so I just used my wire cutters to trim the excess of both and cut the other one completely off. So I took the same wire I used before and tried to make a bigger loop. Good thing it worked the second time. I squeezed the ends together just to make sure that both trimmed ends were closed and won't really hurt me. And with those jump rings made, I can finally attach them to the hooks I made earlier. So here's the finished product of a few days of crafting. I hope you guys like this new style of video. I really have fun making things in my free time, and this was a fun challenge for me. Any suggestions for earrings? Or do you have some other things you'd want to see me make? Leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to see more crafty videos, hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos from me, then hit the subscribe button and the bell to know when a new video is out. I try to upload every week, Monday nights at 8. I guess that's all for this video. Bye guys!